Adjudicator and fellow debaters, today's debate is about whether the rise of self-care culture is good or not. But however, as the government team, we strongly support the motion here. So in my speech, I'll be sharing our team's definition of the key terms in this debate and be explaining two main arguments of our team that support the motion. So first, moving on to my definition, the definition of self-care culture is basically a growing emphasis on prioritizing one's physical and mental emotional well-being. So here, while the definition in the info site says that while critics still agree that self-care culture can encourage excessive focus, we believe that they are not sure if this is true because they are still arguing about this. Government truly believes this is wrong. So in my speech today, I'll be sharing two main arguments that explain that it reduces harmful social pressure when people follow self-care culture, and then many people become more aware also when they follow self-care culture. So my first argument is about reducing harmful social pressure. Modern communities cause lots of pressure to people in the world. So for instance, parents say to students to get good grades in their schools, and also in social media, many people say things to people that are posting things on the internet. So both of these examples cause and make people overwhelmed and stressed. So this means they're having social pressure in this world right now. But however, this is the world where self-care culture does not exist, and people are not supporting this self-care culture, and that they're not following the main features and the main benefits of it. So, here in self-care culture, when they have self-care culture, they can have emotional and mental stability. So, because of this, it encourages people to rest and take care of their health and maybe have a balanced life where they don't get much stress here. But try and imagine a world without self-care culture. People such as teenagers and adults will have burnouts because they get too much stress, and then they will also have severe mental problems because they do not have time to rest and make their mind more clear and rested. So here now, moving on to my second argument, it explains that it makes people more aware of themselves. So when I say this, it means they have more self-awareness, and that means they have the ability to understand like themselves and what they're doing right now. But however, if they have stress, it means that person is being overwhelmed. And let me ask you one question: how can people know what they are doing when they feel overwhelmed? So if they follow self-care culture, their mind can be more calm, and then this means they're not overwhelmed. This means they can be more self-aware and they can communicate better and more well with others. This makes society for them much more comfortable because they're having the ability to communicate better and they're not being overwhelmed. So the main key part of my argument explains that they have self-awareness. When they have self-awareness, it means that they can watch where they're going and they can watch what they're doing. So this means that they can also cause more partly relationships with others, which makes living in society much more better for these people. So in conclusion, I explained two main arguments in my speech: that it reduces harmful social pressure, and it makes people more aware if they follow self-care culture. So for these reasons, government is proud to propose the motion. Thank you.
On the negative side, our world is a world where there will be stronger public healthcare as medical systems would focus on lifestyle medicine, make nutrition and stress management part of a standard free public care. Companies will not rely on mindfulness apps and as band-aids. Instead, real labor laws and unions would successfully fight for shorter work weeks, which targets the direct problem and the root cause of those issues. Furthermore, instead of buying solo wellness, communities will rely on more of a mutual aid and stronger neighborhood networks. This may include better public spaces for connection. Firstly, I'd like to start with some of my rebuttals. The affirmative team has gone on and on about how self-care will lead to less stress in society and for individuals. But we believe that this is just not likely to happen, and there will be more stress with self-care, as currently in our world the self-care is not allowed. You can still buy such items, but especially when self-care is commercialized, as I'll talk about later, there will be a stress to you hop on the latest trend, which can actually add to a person's stress, which can harm their mental well-being. You also said that this will make people more aware of themselves because their mind will be more calm. But again, just this mental and physical toll on them will not be good for their mental health, as they will be in constant stress of just staying on trend. So going on to my argument, which is why will actually become a commercial industry. Why is this likely? Well, firstly, the society values and cares about self-care. The more larger the market for self-care products become, things such as bar soaps, incense, healthier foods, stuff like that. Because people are demanding more and more of these items, more of these experiences, it gives these big, massive companies a stronger incentive to actually be profiting by selling these items, right? So for example, when fitness became a cultural priority, business turned something so simple like running or doing push-ups at home into a commercial industry where people are now spending thousands for supplements, activewear, coaching, and memberships. Similarly, as self-care becomes more important in society, companies will begin to package self-well-being through products and services, prioritizing profit over genuine health. Now, why is this bad? Firstly, companies will exploit people's insecurities. Businesses make money by convincing people that they aren't healthy or productive or happy enough. The key word is enough. They could be already happy, but because there is this massive social trend to be calm and to that they are the issue and that they should calm, they should be meditating and they should be eating healthier, it means that businesses are actually able to take advantage of this and make new items or new technology, which can lead to people buying excessive items and spending unnecessary amounts for things that they really don't need. They create a constant demand for new products and routines rather than promoting genuine well-being. Secondly, well-being will become a trend or a comparison when self-care is commercialized. This is because when companies sell self-care products, they don't just advertise them. They also encourage people to share their routines online so they can make more money. This is especially true with the rise of technology and social media. When well-being is commercialized, it will no longer have a positive effect on human lives. It will no longer be about caring about yourself and how you feel because, well, there's only so much sleep you can get, only how healthy you can eat. And this is all based off an individual's environment, how much money they make, how much money they are willing to spend on products, how much sleep they can get depending on their job. And as more products are invested, you are constantly comparing yourself to those around you to say, oh, look at this girl. She has such a better environment than me. I wish I could be like her, which means that you're wasting more and more money on items you may not need, even though you are happy. Overall, this will lead to people constantly comparing themselves to others, feeling that they are not happy enough or satisfied enough with their lives. They will feel pressure to buy more and they will feel pressure to buy new products and follow more routines. Thank you.
Honorable adjudicator and fellow components, our side of the debate strongly agrees with the motion. This would support the rise of self-care culture. In my speech, I'll respond to government and bring our third argument. Respond to opposition and bring our third argument, and I will start with my rebuttals. The other side said that people are going to buy products that they do not need, even though and they would feel like they are not fully satisfied with their lives. Yes, as they look at these products, yes, they would, and yes, they may feel not satisfied with their lives, but once this happens, we can't. Even if we stop promoting self-care culture, as this rather be a trend, some people in the world still has this problem now. They're not satisfied with their lives. They feel like they don't have enough. So this is a problem we can't exactly solve. They also talked about things like companies would take this advantage and sell items, and like I said before, they would start buying excessive stuff. But like most people, people would try to use their money wisely. People don't use like all their money or more than half their money to try and also be in the trend. Yes, they would buy lots of products, and yes, they may buy excessively, but people as is in this community, they take money. Money is a very important factor, and they would try to use it wisely. Now I'll move on to my argument. The last and third argument on our side is that it can strengthen social connection. We believe that promoting self-care culture is that can not only help yourself, but it can also help your relationship with other people. As you become since self-care culture can help your mental, emotional, and physical well-being, and you sleep enough, exercise, and you have well hygiene, your head becomes more clear. You have better emotional feelings, and you become more connected with others. It can strengthen social connections while doing this for these reasons of motion.
So in this debate, AF fails to consider that the rise of self-care culture does not make well-being more accessible. It makes it increasingly expensive and less affordable for ordinary people. So as self-care becomes commercialized and marketed as a lifestyle, it turns basic wellness into rather a luxury rather than necessity due to prices, and that is going to be my first sentence. But before that, let me begin my speech with some rebuttal. So first of all, they mentioned quite a bit that people will use this money wisely. However, this is assuming that there are these perfect customers. The app just assumes that people will always make rational financial decisions, but in reality, things like advertising and emotional marketing can really influence purchasing behavior, because companies deliberately market wellness products as essential for happiness or wellness. So it makes people more likely to overspend when cheap alternatives exist. So number two, social pressure also changes spending. People don't always make decisions in isolation. So self-care culture is very much impacted by platforms such as for example Instagram, where maybe expensive routines are portrayed as standard by some people. So third response to this is that market price still increase because even if some consumers spend wisely, increased demand for these products still allows companies to raise the prices across the market. The issue isn't really only the individual spending, it's more that self-care branding inflates the prices of ordinary products, making them less affordable for everyone, which will be my first argument as well. So one more response to them saying that self-care culture does not necessarily create they're saying, they mentioned that self-care culture creates meaningful self-awareness, but one response to this. So first of all, self-culture doesn't necessarily create meaningful self-awareness, because it encourages excessive self-focus rather than genuine self-awareness. So true self-awareness, it involves understanding people not only just one's behavior, but also responsibilities and the impacts on others. So modern self-care culture right now very much emphasizes on people's feelings and comfort rather than actual obligations that are quite important. So this encourages a lot of individuals to be overly preoccupied with monitoring themselves rather than actually developing the social awareness that they require. So as a result, so what app tries to frame as self-awareness is just merely heightened self-focus, and it doesn't necessarily translate into healthier behavior or anything positive. So moving on to my first standard, which is that self-care culture inflates prices in the market. So three mechanisms on this. First of all, self-care branding is very likely to create artificial price premiums, because many ordinary products such as candles, herbal teas, skincare, they're often rebranded as self-care essentials rather than everyday goods. So once products are like associated like with this wellness and like mental health, like companies can like charge like significantly higher prices despite like not much of an improvement in quality or production cost, because consumers are willing to pay for these premiums, because marketing convinces them that these products is an investment in their physical or emotional well-being. So as like more firms adopt these pricing strategies, so the prices everywhere across the world become more inflated and become like a new market norm, and basic wellness products just become increasingly unaffordable overall. So our second mechanism, a growing demand, like it allows companies to exploit the consumers. So the rapid growth of like self-culture significantly increased in demand over like for like wellness products and services over the past years. So when demand like rises very fast, like then meaningful like competitive competition or like product innovation, then companies like gain like a greater like pricing power. So businesses recognize that like these consumers like perceive these products as like necessary for maintaining mental health. So it makes like demand relatively insensitive to like price increases. So third mechanism, market resources are incentivized to shift towards luxury instead of luxury affordable care. So as investment flows towards luxury brands, fewer resources are directed towards like producing simple affordable products. So this creates like a market distortion that heavily impacts the legitimacy of the prices of these like assumedly like premium items, which makes wellness options less available through economic inequality. And that is why I'm proud to negate. Thank you.
With Honor Educator, today we are debating on this motion. This House supports the rise of self-care culture. As government whip, I'll introduce you 3 classes that I found this debate and clearly tell why we bring this debate home. First, which side helps these people in mental health problems? The opposition side says that people will still have stress trying to stay on the trend, like the first speaker said on the opposition. And however, this does not actually won't happen in the real world. Judged by enough break and balanced exercise, won't you be unstressed? They also said that they will be more stressed by these self-care cultures because they're kind of expensive. But I'll explain that in my last class. In our world, we actually help people who are mentally stressed reduce pressure by actually doing the self-care culture, by exercising and balanced food choices, etc., which will help people live healthier and happier lives. However, opposition is avoiding this, so we win this class. Secondly, selfishness vs. It raises awareness on yourself. Okay, Josh, the opposition side says that self-care culture can raise selfishness in the commercial industry on companies. They say companies can exploit people that are not healthy. Judge not, but people have a common sense if they're healthy or not happy in this mental health black market. And even though these companies convince them that they're not healthy, people still have these common sense to know that they're healthy or not, like I said before. Just we don't see this commercial industry, we see this as actually just knowing yourself better. That's how can you how can you see can you imagine a company convincing a person to buy this product because you're unhealthy? This cannot actually happen in the real world and by setting personal boundaries, and this is just a self-care culture which will just help on mental health, and this doesn't go until companies convincing them to actually use this actually to buy
Point.
to come to what
Point of information.
the POI.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How does common sense stand in a world of peer pressure?
In peer pressure, people need to have more common sense because they have less money to use in this, because they have amount of money they need to use. So of course they have common sense in this world. And moving on, we just see the self culture as just a step to see yourself better in the society, not companies exploiting people and convincing them to actually convincing and giving peer stress to these people. This is why I'm very happy to propose. Thank you.
First of all, the speaker argues that modern life, the first speaker of the affirmative team has said that modern life, such as academic pressure from parents, and online bullying and memes, causes massive stress, and self-care culture is a shield that stops burnouts. That is We completely agree with that. However, self-care is a band-aid. It is not a solution. Self-care culture does absolutely nothing to reduce the source, the root of the social pressure. It does not stop toxic parents. It does not fix hyper-competitive schooling systems, and it does not fix social media being toxic. It just tells a victim, go take a bath and deal with it yourself. It lets the systemic causes of pressure completely off the hook. And furthermore, they said it reduces harmful social pressure, but actually, like, it increases it. The rise of self-care culture has actually created an entirely new layer of toxic societal pressure. Now people are pressured to have the perfect 10-step morning routine, or like buy the right organic supplements and look aesthetically peaceful on social media. If you are stressed, self-care culture blames you for not meditating well enough, adding guilt to an already stressed person. The speaker also argued that self-care makes people more self-aware. However, there's a vast difference between healthy self-awareness and the self-absorption driven by self-care culture. As our first speaker has said, commercial self-care teaches people to pull away from society and focus exclusively on their own feelings. So when people become very self-aware and protecting their own peace, they stop being aware of others. It kills community. Instead of fighting together against academic or actual workplace pressure, people isolate themselves in their own private wellness bubbles, which makes society weaker as a whole. Furthermore, I've said that the actual public healthcare is broken, and therapy is too expensive, and these self-care tools give these individuals, especially marginalized groups, more accessible ways to manage their mental and physical health when the system fails them. However, self-care acts like a pressure release valve for a broken system. By encouraging these individuals to self-medicate through these wellness routines, it actually relieves real political pressure on these governments to actually fix the actual public healthcare. So if everyone accepts self-care as a solution, we never actually demand any structural reform, which actually traps these marginalized groups in a cycle of privatized health management. They also said that the rise of self-care has mainstream different conversations about these anxiety and burnout and depression, and it has normalized taking a break and looking after one's individual mind, which actually reduces social stigma. Yes, but self-care has trivialized and commercialized serious mental illness. It basically rebrands deep psychological struggles into a lifestyle aesthetic that can be cured by, for example, a bath bomb or a journal or a candle, as our first and second speaker have said. This creates a new stigma. If you are still depressed despite practicing self-care, it is framed as a personal failure to look after yourself, rather than a real medical condition requiring professional intervention. So they also said modern work is extremely stressful, and I feel that is their entire case. However, self-care teaches employees they said that self-care teaches employees boundaries, mindfulness, and coping mechanisms to survive demanding careers and prevent burnout. But self-care is a corporate shield used to exploit workers, like our first speaker has said. Companies readily offer meditation apps and wellness seminars because they are cheap band-aids. By framing these burnout as a failure of personal health self-care, employers evade accountability for toxic workloads, low pay, and abusive cultures. So it actually weaponizes wellness to make workers more resilient to exploitation, which is why I'm proud to propose. Thank you.
So in this debate, the app fails to recognize that common sense is just not enough to protect consumers in a highly commercialized market. So people don't always make perfectly rational decisions, especially when businesses use emotional marketing. So I'll just be identifying two clashes and wait, one. So first clash is on accessibility versus commercialization. So app presents self-care is very beneficial. However, they fail to explain why modern self-care has become increasingly expensive and provides no response to this. So our team demonstrated that companies companies can market ordinary products such as wellness essentials, which allows them to charge expensive prices. So as self-care becomes a lifestyle rather than a habit, so it becomes like less accessible for like other or like lower income individuals. So like a movement intended to like improve well-being instead just creates like financial pressure and inequality, which is why we win this clash, because we have further explain how the rise of self-culture ultimately excludes like people who like support it the most. So second clash is on like self-awareness versus like actual obsession. So like the affirmative argues that like self-care is like self-care like creates like greater self-awareness. However, like awareness alone isn't enough. Our team, we showed that why like modern self-care culture often like encourages excessive self-focus rather than like genuine actual maturity. So constantly prioritizing one's like own feelings can weaken resilience and also community responsibility. So furthermore, recognizing that people can be stressed does not like actually remove the structural causes of that stress. So why we win this debate is because at the end of this debate, AF defends like some benefits of like the practicing of self-care, but however, this motion asks like whether we should support the rise of self-culture. So that culture has become like commercialized, increasingly inaccessible, and it's like a substitute for like meaningful like structural change. So our side protects affordable well-being, institutional accountability, and the long-term social progress. For these reasons, I am proud to oppose. Thank you.
Judge, as the reply speaker of today's debate, I'll be sharing Gov's arguments, give a short oral comparison, and explain why we win before finishing off this debate. Government's three arguments was reduces harmful social pressure, makes people more aware, and improves relationships. We believe these arguments are the most important things in the world that can happen in society because when people get reduced with harmful social pressure, as PM has explained, people has less mental burnout and less mental health problems, which can improve people's life more. Second, it makes people more aware, as the PM also explained, that it creates more self-awareness that makes people communicate better. Also, and the last argument of government team was very strong, and as it explained, it improves relationships. As DPM explained, if there are relationships that are improved, people can strive better in society, which makes society much more better and much more easier to live in. So what happened in the debate today is what happened in the debate today is that government has three arguments and opposition also did have three arguments, and we clashed together with three clashes, as also government has explained. So I'll give a short little comparison before I tell you why government side wins. So government's role is a world where people do not get social pressure and people are more self-aware of themselves, which leads to more communication, which a mechanism follows where they have more relationships in society. But however, opposition's role is where people get too much social pressure, where students and adults also do get social pressure in society, and people are not aware of themselves, which gives a chain reaction to no important relationships in society. So we believe the government team has won because of these reasons. Proud to propose the motion. Thank you.